founded the preschool, which ultimately she built 4 or 5, and educated thousands of young people. You know, preschools are the most important part of a child's education. Preschool, I'm not just saying this is statistical fact. This is what the government says. That's why Head Start is referred to as the most successful social program in history, educating those children. And my wife educated thousands, and the greatest joy that she finds, and I, is that sometime when we're out and about or otherwise hear about some of the young people she began educating. Many of them are in Ivy League colleges and universities. Many of them are working in great jobs and making a difference, not only in Detroit, which we want them to continue making a difference, but all throughout the country. So that's why education is so important. You know, I want to say, Jeff, that what you guys are doing here, I don't have to tell you about Jeff's background. I hope that you all know that he's been in the trenches for 30 years. What was the name of your television show, Jeff?
Transition.
Transitions.
Yes, sir. You were on
30 years back, even before Transitions, he was making a difference in the community. And Jeff's not getting paid. This is Saturdays he comes. He's throughout the community during the week. Jeff, you don't get a check when you leave today, do you?
No.
When you walk out the door, you all don't hand him a check. You say thank you and goodbye. And that's real commitment. And that's real commitment to our community and to what we're doing here. He also works with young people. I've been here to speak with some of the young people whom he has gathered. So we don't want to take this for granted. We don't take him for granted. You all should lift him up as the leader that he is. Give Jeff a big hand.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, one of the things I am so grateful to Jeff about is just his ability and his desire to get you all here so that you can begin and continue for most to work in the community and know that you can make change. You know, I have been blessed to associate with a lot of elected officials throughout the country. And the change that I've seen most often has been in those cities where the leadership is able to uplift the morale. And I just couldn't understand it. I was hearing that over and over. So one day I did a little little television special on crime and community. And we did a couple of cities. And one of the things, I was interviewing the mayor of Newark, who's now running for U.S. Senate, and looks to Cory Booker. He appears to be headed toward the U.S. Senate as our only African American in the U.S. Senate. So we are happy with him. But the reason he's experiencing the success he is, and he explained to me how he was turning Newark around. He said the first thing you have to do, Judge, is uplift the morale of the people.
Yeah.
And I couldn't understand. I said, I keep hearing this, Mr. Mayor, and I really don't understand it. Break it down for me. He said, okay, Judge, people come and invest in cities where the communities are trying to overcome the obstacles that they have.
Yeah.
They don't want to invest in communities where the people look and see the crime going on and they just turn their back, go in the house and let it go down and wish everybody luck, because they know that crime is going to grow. People don't want to invest in communities where they have boarded up houses and no one goes out and either call and continue to call and be the squeaky wheel until you get the oil to the city departments, or get a group of the men or young men out there, buy them some boards, go board it up. Well, keep your eye on it. You do that, the investors and the outside folks who want to bring jobs, they know you care. When you have the parent-teacher conferences and you all get active, one of the things I love about Detroit, and some folks, they've tried to come down on them on the national level, I love when the folks go down and disrupt the school board meetings. I love it. I love it. Because you're showing that you care about the education of young folks. So I was watching on CNN just a few years ago. where they were carrying, unfortunately, the grandmother out. On the back, I believe it was. I believe the school board president at that time faced a problem with his future aspirations when folks saw that on television. And so I was getting calls, they're in your city again. They got the school, they got the police carrying people out. I said, good. I said, because that's what they did with Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement when they were protesting. They carried them and locked them up in jail. So those are the type of things he meant when he talked about morale. That people get out and bug that neighbor, or the block club knocks on the door of that neighbor who won't cut their grass. And so they must know that a city's destiny is based on the community operating successfully from the ground up. Not from the top down, from the ground up. Because I don't know whether you know it or not, in the last 30 years or 20 years, we've had 3 casinos, 2 new stadiums, and many, many other developments downtown, and the unemployment rate has doubled.
Yes.
Unemployment rate is doubled. Don't take my word. Google it. Unemployment in Detroit in the last 20 years, you'll see for yourself. It has doubled. While we had all of this development at the top, great, bottom, not coming up. And part of it is we must come on Saturdays to the community centers. We must get together and have block club meetings. We must work on uplifting the community ourselves, else nobody's gonna look at us as if we're worth investing in. And so we're not coming to town, they don't care about their school system. They're not doing that, the parents aren't coming there. They gotta have radio ads and beg and plead for the kids to be there on count day. What is count day? Can you imagine a major corporation coming to town and say, well, we want to build a new, since the automotive companies are rebounding, we think we should build a new, this is a big supplier, might say, well, we think we need to come to town in Detroit and build a new industrial plant so that we can supply these General Motors and Ford and the others. Well, that takes 1,000 people. If you're a supplier, a big supplier, they hire 1,000 people. So they said, well, let's just go around and send our marketing people or whomever, the research division, send them out in the community and see whether it's worthwhile. See what the education is. And they riding in the car looking around. And see, okay, this block looks all right. Yeah, may have a few blocks that look good. Okay, and then they hear on the radio, count day is coming. We need you to come. We're going to give out some tablets if you come to school. We're going to pay you some money if you come to school. You got to be there. Send your child. Please, we'll pay you. We're begging you. We'll do anything we can. Now, do you think they're going to stay with you? You say, oh, these people don't even want an education. I need educated employees. Because in today's society, you got to know how to operate those machines, and you have to know how to be trained in those machines. And if you have less than a high school diploma, it's hard to even be trained to operate those machines because it's close to operating a computer. Operating those industrial machines now. And so those are the type of things we must do. The morale of the city has to come up. I don't care how much money they're promising downtown. And they say, oh, well, they're spending millions and millions of dollars on this campaign. So they must gonna bring a lot of money to town. Okay, then what? You gonna be able to get the job? No. You get your kids got weed in the system, so when they apply for the job, they're not gonna get the job. They're gonna say, oh, we gotta rule you out. And why? Because they don't have proper supervision in many instances, or we don't have the crime fighting or the crime watch that we need to, and we don't have the inspiration for these young people to say, hey, if I get my education, I'm going to have to get a job, and I can't be on weed because it's going to come out of my system, and I'm going to get a job. We have to let them think and give them the inspiration. So those are all the factors that are going to help uplift our community. I heard Jeff also talk about the past, the present, and the future, and some of the victories that we've experienced. And I think, I heard him talk about 50 years. Well, I think that the African Americans have achieved more victories in a shorter time than anybody in the history of the world. Anybody in the history of the world. We went from slavery to segregation, not being able to participate. Segregation isn't but a step above slavery. It says, you're all right, we're not going to bound you and change and make you work for free. We're just not going to get you jobs.
Right.
In fact, right after slavery, I'm getting a little too far, but every time I get an education, every time I get an opportunity to educate, I do. Right after slavery, and black men in particular weren't being hired. Many of the black women were as housemaids or whatever. They kept them on the property, etc., to feed and help raise their children, and gave them a place to stay, etc. And I think they gave them a few dollars. But many, if not most, of the black men had nowhere to go and no jobs to get. So they wandered on the roadside in the South, just wandering, doing what they could to survive. So then they enacted what we know to have been the laws, loitering, for lack of a better term, vagrant laws. They enacted vagrant laws, and then the sentence for vagrant laws was up to 5 years in prison.
Or working for Mr. Charlie for nothing.
Working for free. So I say that to say a lot of this has to do with history. And so we go from slavery to semi-slavery to segregation. Segregation, we're out of mainstream society. All our men can do, for the most part, is serve as janitorial engineers, if you will, the best way I can put it, and that is pretty much just cleaning up for white folks and getting pennies, and our women could be maids, etc. So it was the civil rights movement, when that came about, and the desegregation movement that allowed us to spread our wings into mainstream society, and they eliminated the laws that stopped that. It was then that we were able to go to better schools. We were able to receive a better education, not better schools, receive a better education. And then we were also allowed to acquire jobs in mainstream society, starting whether it was a government job at the post office, whether it was jobs as we went up in the major corporations, etc. And so that was, I guess, in the around 65 when you had the public accommodation bill, and then you had the voting rights bill. Well, let's go over that real quick. In 1964, the voting rights bill, there were less than 1,000 black elected officials in the nation, representing back then 22 million people. Well, fast forward to today, and in fact, maybe 10, 20 years ago, which would be about 1990, we had gone from, in 64 to 1990, to over 10,000 African American elected officials. We went tenfold in less than 50 years. And then ultimately we know that we used our voting power to elect the first African American president in 50 years. We went from the inability to have the a fair opportunity to vote to electing our own president in 50 years. And then when we saw the Public Accommodations Bill in 1965 that desegregated the job market in many other areas, and of course we know the colored segregated fountains and restaurants, etc. in the South, but it was more than that. It was more than just desegregating it. It was also a push to put us in the workplace. And we were put in the workplace, and from 1965, when 2/3 of all black people were in poverty, 2/3, that's like 7 out of 10 people lived in poverty, black folks. So 50 years later, it had made a 360-degree turn, whereby now only 25% of African Americans live in poverty, and 75% are in the working middle and upper middle class. And therefore, we did all of this in 50 years. So Jeff, you're right. There's no group of people in the history of mankind has come so far, so quickly, after having been enslaved, segregated, and oppressed for so long. Let's give ourselves and so that shows we can overcome our current challenge.
Yes.
That's the best model. If we can go from 50 years being the bottom, the scrub of the country, to taking over the country by electing a black elected official, and it may not be quite taken over, but symbolically, we took over the country.
Yes.
To also going 360-degree economically in 50 short years, we can attack the current problems that plague our community.
Yeah.
And that is failed education system, crime and self-destruction, and economic deprivation. How do we go by that? By doing so, it starts one with that education we talked about. Because even when the jobs come, if you're not prepared with a quality education, that means nothing. You can get all the jobs you want. We can get all the major corporations. We're going to turn Detroit around. 15 years from now, we're going to have thousands of jobs in Detroit. What difference does that make if they can't get hired? They're going to bring it from out of town. Those people down in Midtown who are getting those jobs, well, the jobs that those people are coming from out of town.
That's right. That's right.
Those kids are coming from out of town. And so we must prepare our kids with a quality education. And then secondly, once we get that quality education, we must work hard and encourage them to work hard to develop those skills to get into the workplace. Because the number one solution to crime, a job. That's the number one solution to crime. It's a job. Most crime is motivated, are economic crimes. They're called economic crimes. Unless you're just a violent criminal who just like to get out there and shoot and fight and kill over basic arguments, most of it is economic. I've grown up with a lot of drug dealers and street guys. Most of the guys I ran with, when they got a job, they left the streets. Left the streets. So I say that to say, if we are able to provide opportunity, and where does that come from? Well, we got to fight back with an education. Two, we have to fight against discrimination in the economic mainstream, and that is called economic deprivation. When the jobs leave, we wonder what happened in Detroit. They're trying to blame much of it on the previous administration. Let's take it back 40 years. You know what that means. Let's take it back to when black folks started running Detroit. Go and Google it. I don't like folks to take my word. They say Coleman Young had the best budgets. He managed this city better than any mayor since 1950. Since 1950. If they weren't blind, trying to, 40 years, you know, when Coleman Young took over the city, ain't been financially managed since. That's a lie. When you look, they had a newspaper article. That's where I'm getting this information from. Last 50 years, how Detroit got in this position. And the article headline was, and it wasn't Coleman Young. Because they knew that was people were implying. But it showed, it even had a scale of the budgets and how the income and budgets were managed. And Coleman Young was the best. And one of the mayors that we think was so great, well, they think was so great,
Say it.
added 1,000 people to the budget in 1993. So I'm going to tell you the mayor, if you know who the mayor is. In 1993, added another 1,000 people to the budget when the budget couldn't afford it. As well, gave out generous, through negotiations with the unions, gave out generous packages of health care and pensions that they couldn't afford, bonuses, etc. And then, as a result, ran deficits every year and had to borrow money and then pay the interest on that money, therefore unable to balance the budget on a regular basis. Then you had our last administration come up. Now we found out that the last administration borrowed over $1 billion. And under transactions that now some are looking at as shaky, if not fraudulent. And now the city went bankrupt because we couldn't pay that money back. And so don't blame these 40-year stuff on our first black mayor. Don't let them program you to believe that. And so I say all that to say that we need, and the reason I say it about our administration is because don't let them blame us. We had 100,000 jobs, $1 million jobs left Metro Detroit area since 1980. And guess how many people left the Detroit area since 1980? 1 million people. People follow the jobs. People follow the jobs. And that's what happened. Now there were some deals made with as I said, with management that ran budget deficits, etc., but our city didn't become impoverished because of no city deficit. We didn't get to 30% unemployment and poverty and crime because of the city deficit. And people didn't leave town and take our tax base because of the city deficit. They did it because economic abandonment. They did it because the same corporations and factories that made those corporations rich, those same ones, when Mexico opened up less tax and lower wages and didn't have to deal with unions, they went there. When the South opened up less taxes, when they gave more tax incentive and didn't have to deal with the unions, those factories went there. And so that's what happened. Don't let anybody, it's no big mystery. Don't try to figure it out. They got you trying to count. Y'all trying to look at the budget and count the budget and compare the people and the budget. You don't have to do all that. All you got is two numbers. The jobs that left and the people that left. And they're almost right there together. And so our challenge is to fight against economic deprivation, which in many instances is race-oriented. Every major city in America, which is the majority population African Americans, the jobs have left and the crime and the drugs have come in and the school systems have went down. But it started with the jobs leaving. So let's make it clear. So that's our battle. Educate our young people, prepare them for the workplace, inspire them to go into the workplace, and then fight against any economic deprivation. That's why I'm so proud of our unions and others who are fighting against the taking away of our older our golden age seniors who have went and gotten into these gutters and worked and cleaned out the sewage system. They won't be able to get a pension. No, they want to reduce their pensions by some 20-30% in some instances, taking some seniors from 19,000 to 12,000. Those are some of the numbers that I'm hearing. And so I say that to say we got to fight. And so if you continue to fight, we win. Because I just told you about the struggle we won in 50 years, the biggest struggle in the history of mankind. We won it in 50 years. And lastly, let me leave you by saying every single thing we have fought for, we have won. Every single thing in history. Fought for the abolition of slavery, we won. We fought against segregation, we won. We fought against we fought against segregation and we won. We fought against voting violations and the denial of voting opportunities, and we won. So now our fight is to once again educate our young people for the taxes that we are paying, and then of course fight against any economic deprivation that will allow people to exploit our labor, take our taxes, use it to increase their tax base, get abatements, and then skip town and take the money with them, and then blame you.
That's right. That's right.
All right? God bless y'all. Stay strong.